We're live.
Greetings, everyone. Yes, we are live. Welcome, everyone. We're now live every Monday and every Thursday. So welcome, everyone. It's going to be always at the same time. Have Versan. We have a special guest here today. We have Andy. And, well, Versan, you said you want to say something special in the beginning of this live.
Absolutely. Okay, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today with us. We're going to continuously do this Mondays and Thursdays, and we're going to try to always bring up the hottest trending topics and things that are really relevant to what we see unfolding in the world. But before I begin, I do want to say happy birthday to my dear brother, Vandel. I want to wish him all the joy and happiness in the world. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here with us today, but he's not just a brother, he's my best friend and guide, and I'm incredibly grateful. And I love you, Vandel. I know he's watching this. Okay, so Andy, we are doing a live stream today. We're reaching a lot more people than usual. Most people already know who you are. You've been extremely instrumental and on point for the last 3 years with the BRICS nations, the de-dollarization trends, and the marriage between blockchain and precious metals, something you and I have spoken about so many times. But if you could please give our audience a very brief introduction about yourself and your family business before bringing us up to speed on all the current developments.
Yeah, happy birthday to Vandel, and thanks for having me, guys. And Jake, you're always there, buddy. Good to see you. Jake's in the audience and one of my favorite. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. You know, we started this company 34 years ago this month, and we've done almost 10 billion in sales without a material customer complaint ever. You won't find one. Very proud of our reputation. We're one of 27 US Mint authorized resellers. We're very proud of our storage business. We have exclusives, worldwide exclusives with BRICS all around North America. And we're licensed and bonded as a precious metals company whose corporate entity is in Minnesota. Although I live in Florida, where we have a satellite office, my corporate entity is in a suburb of Minneapolis, the only state in America where you have to be licensed and bonded to transact retail precious metals business. It's an unregulated industry federally. And so having some sort of oversight really, I think, holds us to a higher threshold, to a higher level. Excuse me. And it's something that we really proudly hang our hat upon. And so that's who we are. You know, I guess we're just a company who's had strong fingertips, really, Versan, and been able to hang on through the slow times. And here we are, 34 years later. I pinch myself all the time, wondering how the hell we made it so far. But I'm glad to have made it this far, and equally as glad to be here with you discussing things today.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, there's just so much going on in the world. I think we are going to start with if you could bring us up to speed with what's going on with the BRICS. I know some developments from Saudi Arabia came out, even India, and I'll touch on that here after you finish making your statement.
Yeah, I mean, look, you obviously we have the 5 countries that were admitted to the BRICS: Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia. And we have 35 countries that have now formally applied in addition to the BRICS. We have a situation where, you know, these countries are now effectively controlling the majority of the energy production in the world. They have a larger swath of human population. They have 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals. They control the majority of the strategic shipping lanes in the Middle East. This is a union, if you will, a growing union that is not to be taken lightly. The recency bias, the normalcy bias has a lot of the dollar bulls really just calling this a nothing burger until it's not. And I think that it is a growing chorus of countries that is pushing back against the Western hegemony and doing so in a methodical fashion, where they are base building, they are building strength and unity, and in crypto speak, mass adoption. You know, a lot of people were upset that they didn't issue a common settlement currency at the August meeting in Johannesburg. There were people like James Rickards who said that they would. he also said something that I've been saying for a very long time, several years, and that is that the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization would join the BRICS. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. And, Iran has joined both in the span of a year. Saudi Arabia Iran has joined the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And Saudi Arabia has applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are largely the same countries that are all interested in or have fully applied to or have been accepted into the BRICS. You throw the Belt Road Initiative into this, the Chinese infrastructure project, which is now about 75% of human population and 50% of global GDP. You put all these groups together, which they really are, you're talking north of 85% of human population. You're talking the majority of all of the commodities on the planet. You're talking an entity that I think very quickly reshapes the global macro landscape. And it's one thing for me to talk about it. It's another thing for James Rickards to talk about it. But you have the president of Belarus, who is now formally calling for a summit to do just that, to bring the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization into the BRICS. And when you realize it's the largest regional military organization on the planet, it's legit, it's real. And so what we are seeing really, Versan, more than anything, is this growing trend. And, I think there is a high probability, whether it be between the 200 meetings that take place between now and the big meeting in October in Russia, where we will see many things change and many things take shape and many things be announced. Who knows how many countries will be admitted, but 35 have formally applied, 20 have informally applied on top of the 10. That's in October, a month before the election. I'm expecting the next several months leading up to the election to be anything but dull. I think the Chinese curse is very appropriate for where we are right now. May we live in interesting times. And honest to God, when I started talking about this stuff 3 years ago, never in my wildest dreams did I think we would see things start to accelerate as fast as they have. And look, you don't need a common settlement currency to start to really disrupt things here in the United States. One of the things that came out of the meeting in August was that, okay, we're going to task the finance ministers to go back to the drawing board, and I want you all to come back and present your findings next year in Russia. In the meantime, let's all trade in local currencies. And that's what you're seeing, whether it be in Egypt, in Russia, in China, in Saudi Arabia, in India. All of these countries are trading with one another in their local currencies. Now, I know one of the things you're going to want to talk about is XRP as a bridge currency. What we saw just the other day was the United Arab Emirates using the M bridge to trade with China, which is a platform that allows these countries to trade their central bank digital currencies, sidestepping the SWIFT system. But we've seen admissions from countries like United Arab Emirates, which is the 7th largest producer of oil in the world, who was just admitted into BRICS alongside of Saudi Arabia, say to the world, we're not taking dollars for oil anymore. Iran has said that. Russia has said that. Egypt is talking about completely de-dollarizing and only trading in local currencies. You're seeing this everywhere, and little by little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once. It's logarithmic decay. It's traveling down the Niagara River, not knowing that the falls are up ahead. And although you start to slowly increase your pitch, bang, when do you hit that moment? And I think the instant gratification in this country is not being soon enough is a problem. People, well, it's a nothing burger. It hasn't happened yet. That's exactly the wrong way to look at this. The one difference between the way that these organizations are doing things and the way the West seems to do things is they're doing things in a very methodical, plotted fashion. They're playing chess. We're playing checkers. This is not something that just happened. It's been a 17-year experiment, if you will, in the BRICS that is now accelerating much faster. And that's hard to miss. So, yeah, I think between now and the end of the fall, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk much more between now and then. But we're going to see a lot of things that I think will even start to rattle even the most diehard dollar bulls, look, these countries get one chance to do it and do it right. And that's what they've proven. They haven't done anything off the cuff. They haven't done anything that wasn't well thought out. But when you look at the pieces that are being put into place, whether it be with countries that are resource rich or countries that have strategic shipping lanes, or countries that have a common interest in pushing back against the Western hegemony and finding strength in numbers, this is a trend that I believe will only continue to grow between now and the end of October, and the 200 meetings leading up to the big one in October.
Real quick, Ido, I do want to get your thoughts also, but I would like to add something to the audience. First of all, this conversation, I want you to understand, is going in a chronological order because I want to tie us into something else that we haven't touched on yet. First of all, yesterday, India's foreign prime minister, I'm sorry, not prime minister, the minister of foreign affairs, said in a comment that there are many new countries that do want to join the BRICS alliance. And again, this just shows the global trend that is still happening and the value and usefulness of what the BRICS is offering. The second thing is I want to remind people that only a month ago, several Saudi officials publicly did announce that their alignment was with the BRICS nations, and even some before that. And then the third thing is, for the last 3 days, I've been seeing this, that so many reports, and these are from these deep state news outlets like Reuters, Bloomberg, especially the BBC, and they continue to downplay the notion of all of this, including the notion of Saudi Arabia not joining the BRICS, and that's what they put out. So this just continues to prove that there's this relentless effort to conceal and hide these significant geopolitical changes that we see. And that just tells me, again, they're trying to hide and conceal the de-dollarization trend, and it's still going to happen. But that's 100%. Also, well, yeah, it ties us into the broader narrative of misinformation, manipulation to mislead citizens to prevent a panic. But at the same time, and this is where it's going, the institutions are still, the ones in power are strategically positioning themselves with physical gold, blockchain-based solution investments, including assets like XRP and others. There are many others, but they're simultaneously offloading all the risk that we just discussed onto the everyday consumer with the dollar and the bond market.
Yeah, just one point to nail down what you just said. You know, Saudi Arabia did formally accept their place in the BRICS. There was some question at the beginning of the year, are they going to take it or not? But they did. But when you look at the Crown Prince's statement, he said, China is our most important trading partner last year and for the next 50 years moving forward. Now that 50 years is very important because it was 50 years ago, August, that we signed the Petro agreement with Saudi Arabia. And words have significance if you understand the context. And that is a stick right in the eye of the West saying, yeah, you know what, you had your time, you're going green. You guys signed an executive order to go green. And you've weaponized the dollar against, you know, two BRICS members already with Russia and Iran. But, you know, it's one thing to sanction like we did with Iran. We've given some of that money back. It's a whole nother thing when you have this idiot Speaker of the House and the idiot administration saying, we're going to confiscate those 300 billion in Russian Forex reserves and use them to fund the war in Ukraine. You cross that Rubicon, there will never be a country in the Southern Hemisphere that ever trusts us again. And so, yes, these are very, very interesting times again, but words mean something. And when you have the head of the Saudi kingdom saying, yeah, China is our most important trading partner for the next 50 years, not just today, that means something. And so, you know, one of the biggest bummers in all of this is that, you know, you and I and others like us are really the news, because the stuff that is being reported is really not that important. It's trivial, it's nonsense, and it's periphery that throws you off the trail of what is important. So many people have no idea what's happening across. If you listen to the interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin, he says just that. He says, do the American people not understand, you know, what the dollar is and what you're doing by weaponizing it? You're cutting off your own hand. That's what he's saying, and that's what the rest of the world understands. And these are the things that is going to make it very difficult for the majority of the people we all care about, our friends and our family, who many of which think we're crazy having the beliefs we do, because they can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming, courtesy to a media who doesn't tell us anything important. They'd rather focus on going after Trump and doing things that are just completely and totally a waste of time, rather than talking about what really is a once-in-a-generation change and potentially a change against the Western reserve status. Or, look, you keep chipping away at the settlement status for energy around the globe. At some point, it starts to have massive effect on the reserve status. And if you look, they're selling treasuries, they being the other countries. And what are they doing with the proceeds? They're buying gold. Let me just 2 seconds just explain what I mean by that. If you look at the petrodollar, it wasn't just that we'll take dollars for oil. It's we'll take dollars for oil via protection of the Saudi kingdom and by protection of OPEC, and then we'll take the excess reserves and put them into treasuries. So when you see all of these countries not only not putting it into treasuries, but in fact selling them, and you see at the same time that they've bought more gold over the last 2 years than any time in history, they're choosing gold over the treasuries. Now, why would they do that? Couple of reasons. One, the 10-year treasury was more volatile for the first time in 45 years last year than the price of gold. And if you go back to the year 2000, for 24 years, gold has averaged a 7.8% appreciation. That destroys the value of the bond market, or the appreciation of the bond market, which now has default risk, has interest rate risk, and inflation risk. And so I think that this is a trend that will only go stronger and harder and faster. And, God bless guys like you and your brother who are doing all you can to tell the world what's actually happening, when most of the people have no idea the fastball that's coming right at their head.
Yeah. Ido, would you like to put in your thoughts?
Sure. Actually, I would like to ask a question to Andy, but first, let me give some insights here about, I think there is no doubt that blockchain technology is going to play a substantial role in de-dollarization. I think that's very clear. I actually cover one in one of my videos. Is a document that is called De-dollarizing via smart contracts, where they make several references to XRP, and that's actually by the BRICS journey of economical. So anyone who is interested in that document, I can actually put in the comments later, where they mention XRP a couple of times, and also the escrow-like features that the XRP ledger actually supports. And I would like to ask Andy, do you actually think that this transition that we are living right now, I mean, I don't even put something that's going to happen in the future, is something that is already happening. Now, do you think this is going to happen gradually, or do you believe that might be some sort of trigger, like a specific event could be related to World War or something like that? Do you believe there will be some specific event?
Well, I think that's why I like the term logarithmic decay. Little by little by little by little by little, then bang all at once. It's chopping a tree with a butter knife. It takes a long time. It's the Shawshank Redemption when he dug a hole through his wall with a spoon or whatever. It takes time. And it is happening. Look, 20% of all the oil sales last year were done outside the dollar. It is happening. Look at all the countries trading in local currencies. Look at countries like Egypt, who are now coming out and publicly saying, we want to de-dollarize. We think all BRICS nations need to trade in local currencies. This is a Western-friendly country. You're seeing the same thing with the United Arab Emirates. Even our allies like Macron from France did a huge deal in liquid natural gas with the United Arab Emirates and paid for it in yuan. And so all of these deals are happening little by little by little. And I think there will be an event or a moment where you see more of an all-at-once type of a deal. But yeah, I think it would be revolving around somewhere around OPEC. I mean, I've always thought that in my mind's eye, that's where it happens, because look, the fact that most people really don't even understand what makes the dollar the world reserve currency, but the linchpin of the hegemony of the dollar is that oil is valued in dollars globally. And it's one thing for Iran, and it's another thing for Russia to say we're not taking dollars anymore. Why would they? They're being sanctioned. But when you have the United Arab Emirates, who had 200 countries visit Dubai At the beginning of the year here for a United Nations summit on climate control. And 3 days before 200 delegates get there, they say, we're not taking dollars anymore. You start to get a little bit more provocative. But when OPEC says, listen, you guys signed an executive order to go green and you're weaponizing the dollar, and we just don't align anymore ideologically. And we thank you for the protection of the last 50 years, but we've aligned with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and we've aligned with the BRICS, and you have a massive military presence, much bigger than the West's, much more representative of human population, the large swath of it that's already there, bigger than the West, more GDP than the West, even before the new countries were added. All of these things are coming together where there will come a moment where you see that all at once. But right now, you could argue it is happening, and it's happening in a meaningful fashion, just not as transparent as as one would expect in such a big deal. But yes, I do think something will trigger it. I don't know if it's a war or just a flat out admission by OPEC that we're going in a different direction. And that's when it gets really crazy. And that's when you see this tsunami of dollars hit our shore, creating hyperinflation. This is the great reset moment that Klaus Schwab talks about. I've talked about this with Versan a lot, because how do you get to that moment? Well, you have everyone in the world say, look, we're not taking dollars anymore. Thank you very much. They've all had to stockpile. Every country's had to stockpile dollars for over 50 years in order to buy oil. And if that's no longer the case and those dollars get dumped, it hits our shores in a tsunami of hyperinflation. The byproduct of that is interest rates that have to spike to compensate. You can't have 20% inflation and 5% interest rates. So not only does the banking sector immediately vaporize because they are way over leveraged and undercapitalized, as rates go, they blow up, but so do the stocks, the bonds, and real estate and the dollar. All 5 pillars of wealth evaporate instantly. And the reason I think that this is highly likely that it revolves around this is because now the West has a villain to point to. It was OPEC, it was Xi Jinping, it was Putin, and they did this to us. It wasn't the mismanagement of the dollar. It wasn't the weaponizing of it. It wasn't the going green executive order. It wasn't what we've done with the open borders and the lawlessness and the elections and all of it. Forget about all that. They did it to us. And this country is so, I don't want to say stupid. I just think they're naive. They don't, I know a lot of people that are very well read and very smart. They just read the wrong things. And most of the people in this country will have no idea what just happened, and they'll look to a villain, which then enables us to issue a new central bank digital currency or whatever diabolical things they want to do. But to your point, I do believe there will be an all at once moment. But if you take a step back and look, you can see that little by little by little has been going on now for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I would like to add some information. Okay, I think what we're witnessing, and this is everything we talk about, is the downfall and the decline of empires. That's what's happening in the European regions and in the West. I think the root cause, though, is coordinated with what's happening at the central bank level around the world. The central banks have been colluding, and they've been leading us into a systemic risk of collapsing currencies around the world, because that's what they're doing. And this is what Robert Kiyosaki always talks about. He says, look at what they do, not what they say. And I agree with him. Not to mention the geopolitical tensions through all the proxy wars that we're involved in. The Ukraine proxy wars, hence the biolabs and other disturbing things I don't want to talk about. But the US continuously funding wars, and that's coupled with what the BRICS is doing, challenging the Western reserve currency. But we also have to face the facts of what you talked about earlier, the World Economic Forum. Some of the deeper truths people try not to talk about, but they have something called the young leaders, global young leaders. And what they've done is, I think, penetrated certain governments, certain businesses, even churches and media worldwide, though. And what they're doing is looking for a reason to engineer a reset, but also point the finger, like you said, at BRICS, right? That way they can push for this technocratic CBDC agenda or something like that. So
100%. 100%. I think that's the way to do it.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what they are doing. And they can just point the finger at China, at Russia, orchestrate a war if they need to, because what do? Never let a crisis go to waste. And that's what they do.
Or when all else fails, take them to war. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think 10 years, maybe 20 years ago, you could look back and say, look, this is a conspiracy theory. But if you look to what happened in 2019, and I will not use certain words here, you can actually understand that governments around the world are colluding in terms of control. I think there's no doubts of that. And someone puts here in the comments something that makes a lot of sense that we already discussed, that a possible cyber attack could be the next pandemic sort of event. And they actually have, it's called, well, if you guys are familiar with event 201 that took place before 2019, which is all tied back to the pandemic. Then we have the cyber polygon, which is orchestrated, as Andy said before, it's actually by Klaus Schwab. So basically, they come with these events, they make all this scenario where a cyber attack would take place that takes down the entire supply chain management, ATMs. I mean, the whole system goes down, and there they have just, that could be actually a trigger, in my opinion, that could bring us to the implementation of the CBDCs. I don't see a very bright future right now, especially we can tie this also for the G7 economies. If you guys understand, perhaps there is an attack towards the economies of the G7, and that's kind of tied to what we discussed before, Versan. That is one of the topics here. We have the UK, Germany, recessions are falling. Actually, we have also Japan that was declared into a recession in the last week. So what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, and not only you have recessions in Germany, Japan, the UK, and substantial slowdowns in these key economies of the world. You know, the world is also on the cusp of this giant global wave of commercial property loan defaults that will spiral around the globe, because all of these institutions through derivatives are intertwined. The systemic nature of it is very scary, and they could put a great strain on this whole financial system. But look, I think that you even got analysts from Citibank saying that we're headed for a big slowdown or a recession. This is the chief economist for Citi by 2024. And, a lot of these people will say, well, they point to the robust jobs report, which is a bunch of horse shit, because you look at the numbers in 2023 as an example, that in quietly the beginning of 2024, they come out and say, oh, by the way, we revised those numbers by 440,000 jobs down, or 40% of all the jobs they claim were created in 2023. No, that we're wrong about that. We're sorry. And, the seasonally adjusted nonsense jobs that you see in the 1st in January, they'll revise those down too, just like they do the CPI. That the information that comes out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a bunch of crap. Now, you look at a country right now, that has massive credit card delinquency, and for the first time ever, we're over $1 trillion in credit card debt, and you got student debt of 1.6 trillion record, which happens to be the largest asset of the U.S. government, and record government debt, record auto debt, record mortgage debt, low levels of savings. I mean, and how about the layoffs? I mean, look at the layoffs that are just getting started. You go down the list, you got, Twitch, Roomba, Hasbro, LA Times. I mean, these are all 35%, 31%, 30%. LA Times, 20% of the workforce cut. Spotify, 17%, Levi's, 15%, Xerox, 15%. I mean, that's of their workforce, 15%, Wayfair, 13%, Washington Post, 10%, eBay, 9%, on and on and on. Citigroup, 20,000 employees, Paramount, 1,000 employees. I mean, Charles Schwab, 6%. You're seeing massive layoffs in full-time positions and being replaced by 2 or 3 part-time positions. And I just think that the information that we are being given that speaks to strength in economy is a complete and total lie, and we're going to get blindsided by it. So yes, I would say a high probability of a recession, not just hitting the European countries, but hitting us as well. And then you get into the commercial real estate issue, where 70% of these loans are held by the small regional banks. 70% of the business, small business loans are held by the regional banks. And so when you begin to see the commercial real estate problem, where the Xerox building in Washington, D.C. sells for like $150 million a decade ago and is now selling for, or just sold for like 15 or $20 million. I mean, we're really, really, really close to that problem happening. And then you start to exacerbate the problems with the inner cities where all this commercial real estate is. It turns into a graveyard. There's no one there. All these businesses and services that sprung up to cater to all of the workers in these cities. Now, what do? And so then you start to move into the residential real estate, because you can have a really kick-ass 3% mortgage on your house or 4% mortgage on your house. And that's great until you lose your job, because everyone's paycheck to paycheck. 65% of this country is paycheck to paycheck. 45% earning over 100,000 paycheck to paycheck. So first goes the commercial bank or the commercial real estate, which then spills into all of the businesses around there, the small business loans, and then the residential. And let's not forget the regional banks, which are hanging on by a thread. And oh, that's right, that funding program, that bailout program, well, that ends in less than a month. That ends in 3 weeks. So all of these things are culminating. So yeah, I think we are heading towards, I would be very, very surprised if we don't head towards some sort of massive recession. And that is unless they change the definition of it once again. You could argue we're already in it. But yeah, I think it's coming, and it may start across the globe, but it will also hit the U.S.
Yeah, if I may add something, the banking crisis is inevitable. There's a lot of systemic risk too with the bad loans and whatnot, but also this is a result from the pandemic, everyone working from home. They have to default on these loans. It's like they put them in a position to default, almost like they knew this was going to happen so they can consolidate. Without going into too much detail, this ties us into what are the institutions doing as to protect themselves, because that's what they are doing. I read an article the other day highlighting the continued trend of central banks buying gold. And this is what we've been talking about so many times. They keep buying gold 3 years in a row now, consecutive years. So it's not hard to connect the dots. And when I say this, I'm talking about the fact that the US is facing a debt crisis, a credit crisis, a liquidity crisis, and a banking crisis. The only reason they're able to hold this shit together is because the Federal Reserve is actively involved. But how long is that going to last, right? Not to mention what's happening with Basel III regulations, which elevated again gold to a tier 1 asset, gold reevaluation that's on the horizon that corroborates everything that we've been talking about. So the question then becomes, what is the end game? And it's really them offloading the risk onto the people that aren't paying attention. And they are going to be tokenizing gold on the blockchain. They've already announced this publicly. The World Gold Council, World Bank, they're talking about classification of some digital asset, XRPs. You know, we believe XRP is going to be at the forefront of all this. But there is no doubt they are going to tokenize the central bank gold reserves on the blockchain. So
I've been saying that for a long time. I've been saying that for a long time, maybe 2-3 years, because, you know, you think about it, and if you're a student of history, you know that President de Gaulle from France converted all of his dollars into gold as much as he could. And that's why Nixon closed the gold window, proving that convertible currencies convert. It's Gresham's law, where, you know, the bad money chases out the good. And so with the understanding that convertible currencies convert, you couldn't ask for a better marriage then between blockchain technology and gold, in the respect that it shows the immutability and the veracity if done appropriately. You know, a ledger is a ledger if it's controlled. See, the only thing where I start to get a little bit fuzzy in all of this is the decentralized side of things. And of course, certainly I understand for it to be truly legit, decentralization is important, because if it's a centralized ledger, well, you would argue the people controlling the ledger probably have the ability to mess with it. I do understand that. But if it were done in the right way, where you have it audited, you have it independently audited by, you know, international auditing companies, you could do it the right way, where you have the distributed ledger technology showing the veracity of whatever the commodity or gold, which is the only other tier 1 asset, pledged to the system, backing the currency. I think it's a no-brainer. The question becomes, and maybe this is a question that you can answer, Versan, is how do you then put a decentralized ledger into something that then enables there to be a national currency? Is that something that you believe the governments will ever allow? And this is where I will lean on you, because I do believe one way or another, whether it be permission-based and centralized, or in a perfect world, decentralized, I do believe that that will be an end game, that you will see a commodity backing of a new system. And really the only way to do it without making it redeemable, but to still show the immutability and the veracity, is to employ blockchain technology. So what is your thought about being able, I don't mean to twist the tables here on you, but what is your thought on a government being able to issue a decentralized currency or a decentralized platform to issue a currency of a sovereign nation?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to clarify that XRP was really not designed for retail use. It was designed for the institutions. Now, the theory that I presented, again, it aligns perfectly with the widespread adoption of Ripple's technology. And that's what we see amongst central banks, and not just within the BRICS nations. Central banks within the BRICS nations have adopted the technology publicly and outside of it. And the reason why is because XRP can function as a decentralized bridge reserve asset class. And that makes it, again, an ideal candidate for a gold-backed stable coin system. That's the way I see it. And that would also explain what we've talked about, is that the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, the World Bank, they've been interested in XRP very quietly, but they've also considered, the IMF and the World Bank have recognized it as a potential stable coin candidate. And I just find that to be very interesting. There's a connection there. And I've said this many times, I don't have all the answers. That's why we need help from everybody else. You know, that's why we're doing these live streams too, is so others can come in and fill in those blanks. So we have somebody that might be able to fill in the blanks, but Quincy Jones, we tried to get him on the show before. But
well, I did see the World Bank recently classified XRP as a stable coin and recognizes them in their role of cross-border transactions, or helping facilitate that. And I think that is certainly a positive step. But, you know, to your point and to your question, I do believe that that is the way that it will work. Look, there is no other reason why, in my mind, the BIS, which is the most powerful bank on the planet, issues or levies gold to a tier 1 status, the only other one in the world next to US dollars and treasuries. There is no other reason why the central banks are accumulating it the way that they are. And I think that in order to have any credibility in a system, you have to have it pegged so that politicians cannot continue to inflate the way they have since the beginning of time and choose inflation over austerity. And I've always said that there will be a marriage between blockchain and gold and silver, or gold, or whatever commodity they are using to peg to the system, which I believe will be gold. But I guess the question really, in my mind, that I can't quite, because I'm old school, Versan. I'm old school, although I have an open mind, and I own some cryptocurrency, and I'm not the expert on it, but I do believe in my soul that because of it not being practical for conversion, if you have the ability to show the immutability, that then makes everyone feel comfortable to gain trust in a trustless system, then I think indeed you have the makings of a very credible system to challenge the current system, and I think that is indeed where we are going. I've been very consistent on that. How it all plays out, not sure, but I do believe ultimately, to answer your question, that yes, gold and blockchain will be married to a new system. And you look at all of the things that are happening on the periphery, it just makes the most sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, hopefully we can get somebody in the future to answer in those little blanks there that we really can't figure out. But like, we talked about earlier, it's not hard to connect the dots. We do see something happening there. There is a connection, and hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of it. But if you look at what the institutions are doing and what they're saying, is they're basically saying that XRP could be accepted by global banks and financial institutions for the international settlement. But like we talked about, stable coins, what is the definition of a stable coin? It's anything that's pegged. Right now, stable coins are pegged to the dollar. And the dollar is backed by the bond market, which is ultimately failing. So the IMF even said this, I think you shared that with me, Andy, when Kristalina Georgieva said another digital currency without gold backing is just another repackaged fiat currency.
Yeah,
So,
and before that, she did say that a cryptocurrency not, or a central bank digital currency not backed to anything is fiat and by anything is fiat. And about 6 or 8 months before that, the IMF issued a report saying gold as an international reserve currency, question mark, a barbarous, or comma, a barbarous relic no more, question mark. And that was the title of the report, where they are acknowledging gold's role in a currency system. And the only way to show that, I guess, and what better way to show than the immutability of a blockchain, have it audited properly, have it administered properly with transparency. This is why Zoltan Pozsar talks about this being Bretton Woods 3, this new system that will be a system of commodities and transparency. Bretton Woods 1, when the dollar took over for the pound sterling after World War II, and loosely Bretton Woods 2, when the dollar became the petrodollar in 1973, being backed by oil, really, or denominated in oil dollars. And so now we are moving to Bretton Woods 3, because we are just like every other government. I mean, at the end of 2023, we had $32 trillion and in debt, and now we have over 34 trillion. In the span of 1 year, you added over $2 trillion in debt. It took this country over 200 years to do that the first time. We're now doing it in a year. Now we have interest payments on the debt of $1 trillion or more moving forward, to the point where the Congressional Budget Office says in 6.5 years, every single penny that we take in tax revenue will go just to pay the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement spending, like Social Security, which is 77 trillion underfunded. And a trillion seconds ago, my favorite statistic is 31,688 years ago. That's a trillion seconds. How the hell do you pay off 77 trillion, where they say by 2033, just 2 years after 2031, that it's broke, Social Security. And the Congressional Budget Office is a bipartisan group. This is not political. And that doesn't take into account the 12 million people and growing that are entering this country illegally, how we pay for that, schooling and education and housing and all of that kind of nonsense. And, how does a country like the United States remain the world superpower when everything discretionary, including military spending, will have to be borrowed in 7 years? It can't. Something's going to happen, and we're getting to that point. I quite frankly think it'll happen much sooner than 7 years from now, but mathematically, we are getting to that point very, very quickly. We need a new system. And a government that can destroy the value of its currency through printing it the way that we can is really not unusual in historical terms. It goes all the way back. Politicians have always done this. So if you want a system to work, it has to be pegged to something. And I don't think you do one-to-one. Even if you had, let's pretend this is an ounce of gold. 10% of every currency unit is pegged to an ounce of gold at whatever price. You still have 90% latitude for monetary maneuverability. You don't have to do one-to-one. It could be just a little bit, just so that 10% is a chain holding it down, so that you can't do what all politicians have done since the beginning of time and choose the printing press over the tough decisions. And that's what the world needs. And blockchain is the perfect answer to it, in my opinion. And so is a tier one asset, which has only been dollars and treasuries, and now it's gold. Do you think there's any coincidence that the central banks of the world are buying it at the level they are, since it was reclassified tier one? And then you look at countries like China, which are taking it to a whole different level. Not only have they bought more than anyone and bought for 14 straight months in a row, I wonder how many people know that they bought the London Metals Exchange a few years ago. And if you look at what the London Metals Exchange is now doing, they are pricing, or going to be shortly, the Shanghai Gold Exchange contracts on the LBMA. In Shanghai right now, silver is almost $3 an ounce higher than it is here in the West. And gold is almost $100 higher there than it is here in the West. Arbitrage, slowly turn up the heat. And all of this metal leaving the COMEX, you're seeing tons of it leave the COMEX and the LBMA. Where the hell do you think it's going? It's going to the BRICS. It's going to the Shanghai Exchange. It ain't ever coming back. And now they want to start warehousing metal held on the LBMA in China. So they own the exchange. They're going to price Shanghai contracts, which are arbitraging at greater than 10% in gold and silver and just under 10% in gold. That can go higher. And then they're going to warehouse it there, and they're the ones buying it all. And I mean, you can see where this is going if you open your eyes. You do not need to be an economist or Kojak to see, for those of you who are old enough to remember who Kojak was, Telly Savalas with this sucker. You don't have to be a detective to see the crumbs that are being laid at our feet. You don't have to be even that astute. If you just open your eyes and you can see that this is something they're doing methodically, little by little by little. They could crank the heat way up, but then you cut off your nose to spite your face. Our stupid ass Western media doesn't even tell us that there's arbitrage going on in the gold and silver market. They don't tell us any of the important things that are going to ultimately lead to not just de-dollarization, but to a very, very religious experience for many people in the United States, if indeed we get to that moment where the dollar is no longer the sole settlement currency for energy. Remember, every single country in the planet Earth has had to stockpile dollars to buy oil for 50 years. 20% of those didn't use dollars last year, oil sales. What happens if it's 50 or 60? Or what if it's just, we don't want dollars anymore? We're going to take other things. What happens to those dollars? What happens to this country? And not only then when that hyperinflation hits our shores, not only does it blow everything up from the misallocations and the distortions that were created from a decade of suppressed interest rates and easy money, created these and asset prices, it blows up and consolidates all the banks, which does all the dirty work for this administration. And then when you realize that, okay, the unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government and military pensions, who's that all owed to? That's us. Who's been selling all the treasuries? That's them. Who's been buying all the treasuries? That's us. The hedge funds, the people chasing yield, people leaving the banks, going into the money markets. That's all invested in treasuries. People chasing yield, not leaving it in traditional assets when you get 5% on a 6-month treasury. So the American public is on the hook for the majority of the debt, 34 trillion plus all the unfunded liabilities. It's a whole hell of a lot easier to default on the American public and blame a victim, a villain, for the victim, and start all over than it is to fall on the sword and say, we're sorry, we screwed up. So I think that, the things that we talk about, Versan, I think are rooted in logic and fact. Where it deviates a little bit is trying to put them together. And I don't know what ultimately happens, but if I had to guess, it's somewhere near what we're talking about here, where the whole system blows up, a new system emerges, the CBDC is rolled in. And when you realize the lead economic advisor for the United States government is a man named Jared Bernstein, who advocates for the loss of the reserve status, and he's written reports on it. It's been picked up all over the place. Dethrone King Dollar as an example. He wants to lose the reserve status. So what do? You weaponize the dollar and sign an executive order to go green. Then you destabilize the country every way you can, from elections to border to divisiveness and lack of unity and everything. And now you got people saying, what the hell's happened to the United States? So if we were still revered the way that we were for, all my life, where people say, geez, I want to grow up and live in the United States, and I've been listening to their music and watching their shows forever. I want to be there. Well, I wonder if people are saying that the way they used to. I mean, it's still the best country in the world, but it's changed a lot, and it's changing maybe not for the best. So when you talk about the possibilities of this being controlled demolition, a planned event, either that or it's too stupid to be stupid would be my 2 cents on it, because the things that we are doing are leading us to a point where the rest of the world says, nuts to the U.S. It's been a nice run, but we're going to coalesce with countries that really have a clearer vision of where they're moving.
You nailed it. Ido.
There is one topic that we haven't touched here. Actually, it's all connected, but it's quite ironically that is happening right now. And basically, artificial intelligence and massive layoffs. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of what's going to happen in the next, I don't want to give timelines here, but perhaps 24 to 36 months. Do you have any thoughts of that? And I'm talking about it because just this week that has been a new model of AI that is capable of creating videos. And basically right now it's virtually impossible to distinguish what is even real of what's not even real on the internet. And that actually has huge consequences for many industries out there, including designers and people who work with online sales and every type of services that you can possibly imagine. How do you see that? Do you think
Yeah,
it's
I
going to
think
have
it's really
massive
scary, to
consequences?
be honest with you. I think you're going to witness entire industries disappear. You know, I grew up in Minnesota. This is kind of a poor example, but it gets the point across. I spent 50 years in Minnesota. They have one of the nicest airports in the United States. And, you know, when you come out of the airport, there's 50 or so, literally almost 50 gates that you can drive your car through to, you know, to check out if you've been parking there. And there's one booth where there's a human being. The rest of them, you use a credit card when you come in and out of. They have, I don't know, it's an international airport. They have 5 or 6 terminals, a couple hundred gates. It's huge. And they have restaurants literally at almost every gate that they built. They remodeled the whole thing. It's incredible. But in these restaurants, they're all iPads. And there's one food runner and one bartender and a cook or two. So what you're witnessing, you go through the McDonald's in the airport. There's the kiosks. There's hardly anyone there. We're witnessing technology as being incredibly deflationary. Now, when you start talking about AI and how it has the potential to, you know, really disrupt, you know, really disrupt industries like accounting and advertising and marketing and everything for that matter, I think it's really very scary. It's Pandora's box that you've opened up. And yeah, I think indeed that this again leads to a deflationary, recessionary slowdown in the economy where, you know, quite frankly, I think people would be wise to nowadays, if they're not going to go into something like AI or AI related industries, you better know how AI affects your industry. And quite frankly, it'd be pretty damn smart to go get a trade, become a plumber, you know, become an electrician, learn something, go back to what, you know, just go back to the way things used to be, because AI is going to disrupt a lot of the jobs and a lot of the businesses out there that have forever been very human dependent, that have no need for them anymore. Why do you need a person when you can have AI give you the answer quicker and better and more reflective of a whole culmination of human knowledge, rather than one person doing it and taking time and paying, and they can get sick and they need time off, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's very scary, to be honest with you.
Yeah. If I could touch on 2 things, I might have shared the story in the past on the live stream. I was at the bank once and I was doing some business in there, and the lady was giving me an attitude, and she was like, you know, you could do this online. And I said nicely to her that if I was doing this online, you wouldn't have a job, ma'am. So that's just an example. I don't think people understand what AI is going to do to the job market. But this also reminds me of what happened in the pandemic. See, because I look at things very big from macro. So they forced down the lockdowns, businesses were shut down. It played right into the hands of the big corporations to further consolidate the dominance. But because of all the issuing of money, the inflation, the bad debt, what happened was it set the stage for institutions to adopt artificial intelligence so they can lay people off. And they tried to sell this off as like, oh, this is going to make things so much better. And I think if you know how to use it to some degree, but there's also the con of getting AI to really start thinking for you. And I know how this goes, all right? I've seen something like this before. We take it, we try to use it to better ourselves and improve our lives and our work. But eventually, we're going to start relying on it to a degree where people forget how to think for themselves. And we're already seeing it with the youth. So we just have to be.
It's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, it is. And I see it. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I do see it. And, you know, I think that's a very scary thing. You know, like if you're using technology to do your thinking for you, I think a lot of the things we learn in school, you may never use again, and you wonder, why the hell did I do that? Because it teaches you how to critically think. It teaches you how to work. It teaches you how to get around obstacles. And if you're using the crutch of artificial intelligence or a calculator, or when I was young, you had to use the Dewey Decimal System, and you had to use an encyclopedia or an almanac or a dictionary. God forbid you open a book nowadays, and so these are the things that I think are, you could argue, in some respects are positive, makes life better, and in other respects makes us a country that is or a civilization that I think is running down a very scary path, where you're going to have a massive gap between those that have and those who have nothing. You are destroying the middle class, as an example, and you have the elite and you have the rest. And I think you continue to move down this road, it becomes very much like a sci-fi movie, and you can see how that plays out. So again, Versan, I'm not an expert on any of this, but I don't think it takes you don't need to be an expert in artificial intelligence to see how this has a hugely deflationary effect on the economies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know what happened to Ido. I think he dropped out.
With AI, we probably don't need him anymore.
AI probably, yeah. Okay. I want to give this to the audience. For some people, a lot of our listeners are, they dig pretty deep. There's something that they should do their research on, which was D-Wave, Google, quantum computing. And one of the Google engineers was actually let go. And this story was covered very briefly on mainstream news, and it kind of got thrown away and buried, and the guy was just pushed away. And he was talking about how he found out through some high-level people at Google that they created a sentient AI. And I know that sounds crazy, but look what happened today. Everyone thinks everything's crazy until it becomes fact. So if that is the case, eventually, this thing could be turned around against us. And I guess maybe we could be just propping it up to do just that. Who knows? But quantum computing power is very dangerous, in my opinion, especially when you have the wrong people using it. So let's not get off topic with AI and whatnot. Ido, can you hear us, Ido? You want to bring back? We're done with the AI topic.
Yeah, I was hearing your comments, so thank you for that. I think it was pivotal to make some comments about AI, as it's highly connected to the massive layoffs. Versan, what is the next topic we have to cover here? I see we talked about central banks. We talked about XRP.
We were going to discuss the World Bank classifying XRP as a stable coin. They said potential classification. So I guess, Andy, we just wanted to see if we could get some of your thoughts. I think we kind of already covered this, but maybe if we can touch a little bit more around it.
And just let me add something quickly as well. I would like to hear his thoughts. That's why I make this intervention about a potential reserve currency as well. If we know the definition of reserve currencies, currency held in substantial amounts by central banks. So it might also fit a reserve currency, and that was also mentioned many times by Ripple in the past. So I would like to hear his thoughts on that.
Well, as far as XRP being positioning itself as a bridge between different digital currencies, I guess in particular central bank digital currencies, my thought keeps coming back to the speculation that it could be backed by gold, and being that you have the global banks and financial institutions saying that it can be used for international settlements. So backing it by gold for its fair value, I think, would be something that would be huge. It would be massive if it were indeed. Now, again, here I would think that if you go this route, the only way that it does work is if you make it redeemable. And this is where we get a little bit fuzzy. And, does Gresham's law take hold or not? But look, I do believe no matter what, that gold is going to have a role in this. And if indeed XRP is the bridge between currencies, and if indeed it can be backed by gold, I think you have a huge demand where, you have, not only do you have a global demand for countries to trade this way, but the fractionalization of it, the ability to take possession of it, opens it up even much, much further. And I think that is the way that we are going. Whoever is able to unlock that, that formula first is certainly going to win. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
About reserve currency as well. I think there are two concepts here that we have to individualize. One is a bridge currency, and the other one would be reserve currency. Do you also think it's a potential to become a world reserve currency?
Well, I think, again, I don't even know that we need a reserve currency. And I say that to you because, like I said, the real issue to the reserve status of the dollar is the bond market, where excess are put into treasuries, which has been very safe and stable forever until it's not. And I think settlement currencies are really more something that we'll focus on with BRICS, at least for a while, or any challenger to come in and issue a new reserve currency is very difficult. But you continue to use local currencies to trade with one another, sidestepping the dollar for settlement. And over time, it begins to have massive effects on the reserve status. At the same time, people are buying gold in I believe, strongly in doing that instead of using bonds for their reserves. And I think it would take a lot of time in order to issue any credible reserve currency. But I think if you continue to chip away at the settlement status and look at something like gold, and here's where XRP could come into play. They put their excess reserves into gold held on a blockchain using XRP as the bridge between the two. It's a perfect mix. You don't need to have a robust bond market at first in order to find, I think, settlement currencies that will greatly affect the reserve status of the dollar. So maybe over time, you see, look, the BRICS have already issued something called the Maharaja bonds, $40-50 billion worth. I can't believe how fast they issued them. They're only allowing them to be purchased with BRICS currencies for now, but it's a step in the right direction. What we are seeing, at least as far as they're concerned, what we are seeing in all of the local payment settlements with one another is beginning to have a very profound effect on the settlement and ultimately the reserve status of the dollar. You look, when you talk about all of these countries accepting dollars, for many, many years, the dollar was as good as gold because countries could redeem it for gold. And then we had the Petro deal. So no longer is it backed by anything, and it appears very strongly to me that, yes, we're still the supreme, we have supremacy, but the hegemony is gone. The fact that there are countries trading in local currencies, the fact that 20% of oil production sold outside the dollar, the fact that you have countries that are like Iran that are selling their oil to China for yuan and then immediately converting it into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, all of these things are chipping away at the settlement status of the dollar, which ultimately starts to break the reserve status. So until there is a agreed upon reserve currency, if there is, other than the dollar, I do believe that gold and local currency trading will take its place, at least for the time being, until we get to a place where there is something that the world agrees upon as a reserve currency. But certainly the dollar, you could argue we have done everything in our power to squander the good graces of our foreign creditors and in much of the world. Not only the way that we weaponize the dollar and now even talk about confiscating it, not only in the way that we have inflated away the value of it and distorted the value of the bond market, but I think the world looks at the way we do things with resentment. I keep talking about on all my shows the way we have acted in Iraq, where we entered their country 20 years ago, supposedly to liberate them in search of weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find any weapons. We destroyed their country. We toppled the regime. We placed a new one in there 20 years ago, and we're still there. And we control all of their oil revenue held at the New York Fed. They're not even allowed to direct it. And we're sanctioning 14 of their banks for trading with Iran, for trying to buy liquid natural gas. And here we are 20 years later, still occupying the country. And they asked us for $1 billion of the $90 billion they made in oil revenue last year. And the U.S. said no. For whatever reason, they said no, not right now. And so they've made trading in dollars illegal. They want to kick out coalition forces. If you own a business and trade in dollars, you'll be put in jail. They'll take your business. There are no green bills like these, none of them in any of the banks in Iraq anymore as of January 1st. And so they look at the way we handle our affairs in a coercive manner rather than a cooperative. If you look at the BRICS, they are not bound to each other in any respect. They are all there in a cooperative manner. And if you look at the way that these countries are doing things, like China building roads and bridges and maritime channels and oil refineries and gold mines, and everything they are doing is not coercive. There's not a gun to anyone's head. It's all cooperative. And these are the trends that are leading to the demise of the dollar as the reserve currency, because we're doing everything in our power to lose that privilege. So little by little, ultimately, something will arise to take the place of the dollar as a reserve status. But at first, I think gold is that bridge, if you will, no pun intended, to a reserve currency, because it acts very much. In fact, it acts much better than the bond market over the last 24 years. It's way outperformed it, and doesn't have the counterparty risk that you find with treasuries, where if you're Russia, well, we can take your 300 billion. Sorry, we don't like what you did. Forget about what we did in Iraq. We don't matter because we control the reserve currency. So we are viewed as very hypocritical. It is our actions that is leading to the demise of the reserve status of the dollar. And until something arises that works, I think that's what gold will be, until otherwise noticed. But the trading outside the dollar, especially for energy, with all of these countries that now control the majority of energy production and transportation of the world, it's not a good sign to the ultimate reserve status of the dollar moving forward.
Yeah. Real quick, I know we've gone past your allotment, so I really appreciate you taking your time with us, Andy. Number one, next time we do a conversation, we need to expand on the fact that you said we might not need a reserve currency, because that does make a lot of sense, especially given what we see happening and the technologies that are presented. So we can actually circumvent that.
Well, when you look at like the Project M Bridge, or when you're talking about XRP as a bridge to what? Trading local currencies. Exactly. And so everyone accepts everyone's currency in the block, and the reserves, the excess, you put them into gold. Well, do you really need a common reserve currency? I don't think so, if it's done the right way.
Yeah, and another thing also, this is why it's key for the audience, remember to have a diversify your investment strategy beyond digital assets too, and to include physical assets like gold and silver, because that does serve as a hedge against all this uncertainty that's out there. I mean, we're speculating, healthy speculation. We have a good understanding of what this is going to look like, everything we just talked about here, but we still don't have all the answers. And I still think with a gold reevaluation on the horizon, and again, tier one asset class, zero risk, it's important to have some gold.
It's crazy, Versan. If you look at the balance sheet of every central bank on the planet, the gold that they hold on their balance sheet, it's held in an account called the gold revaluation account.
Right.
And, that's what Roosevelt did in 1933. He devalued the dollar by 40%. That's what the head of the Dutch National Bank says we should do right now. If you jack up the price of gold, now your assets are on par with your liabilities. You reliquify the economy. That's exactly what he did. And, I think there is a high probability you see the West try to do that. But that falls right into the hands of the BRICS, because they're the ones who've been accumulating it all and they produce it all. And that's why James Rickards has come out and said, look, they don't even need to issue a currency that is pegged to gold per se. But what they could do is they could actually, you revise that. They don't need to have it pegged actually to physical gold. They could peg it to the price of gold in US dollars. And so that if the US tries to inflate, the dollar goes down, gold goes up, the BRICS win. If they try and accumulate more gold the way that the BRICS are doing, the dollar goes down, gold goes up, the BRICS win. There are many ways to do this, but the bottom line simply is that I do believe that there are too many coincidences in the fact that it's now tier one after 75 years of it just being dollars, the fact the central banks are all buying it, this new proliferation of blockchain technology and all of the BRICS and the central banks and talking about it, and the IMF talking about it, and understanding that a currency that is not pegged by something, well, what is that something? Oh, tier one gold. Yeah. Then it's fiat and central bank. I mean, all of these things, you put them all together, it's like, yeah, it just makes the most sense. So I think the best thing that you said in my mind is that it doesn't need to be either or. It should be both. People who respect and understand cryptocurrencies should understand that the whole genesis of it is getting away. You're basically shorting the dollar when you're buying cryptocurrencies. Well, you know, I mean, if you understand that that's kind of what gold and silver are to begin with, hedging your bet and taking some of the profits you make in that space and putting it into gold and silver only makes your portfolio that much stronger. I believe in both. I own both. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive of one another. I think you become much stronger when you have both. And that's exactly what Kristalina Georgieva was saying.
Yeah. You know, this has been a phenomenal conversation, Andy, and I think we have to do this again, and we'll certainly expand.
You know, I love coming on with you guys, man, and wish your brother a happy birthday for me. Ito, it was nice to meet you finally here, and I wish you guys the very best. I follow almost everything you do, and I'm always just a text message away from you, brother. Happy to come on anytime. We're on the same team.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy, and I'm happy to announce here that I think we hit an all-time high for people watching the show today. You know, so thank you so much for your insights. I think the audience is just loving it. There's so many great comments over here. So thank you for that. I think we are just trying to put the puzzle together. I think we don't have all of the answers, but just by hearing some of your insights, I think we are getting more closer to the truth, you know.
And you know what, you guys, I love listening to your insights because, you know, it's bullshit to think that an old dog can't learn new tricks. I mean, I've been doing this longer than almost anyone in this industry. And I respect the one thing I've learned, and as I say goodbye, is that if you don't roll with the changes and learn how to do that, as painful as it is, you get rolled by it, and that hurts a whole lot worse. So I thank you guys for enlightening the old dog, and know that I'm always happy to come back and pick up where we left off with great admiration and respect. I wish you and everyone else out there good weekend, and look forward to catching up again real soon.
Well, thank you again, Andy. Have a wonderful day. Okay, we'll talk soon.
You too. And Jake's Custom Parts, love you, brother. You all take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
That was fun. I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation. As usual, Ito, thank you so much, you know, for being a wonderful host as well. This is going to be a good year. That's why we got to be on top of everything, right?
Yeah, so we made this decision now. We're going to go live twice a week for everyone who is watching us. It's so much things going on right now that just by one time a week, we can't really cover with everything and with every guest that we want to have here on the show. Guys, if you have some suggestions, someone that you want, drop here in the comments. We're going to have a look. We can reach out to some people to invite them on the show. And yeah, thank you, Versan. It has been a great conversation. I think I learned a lot. I was silent at some times, but I was just processing all this information. We just had so wonderful guests today.
Let me tell you something, man, Ito, and to all the listeners. You know, I spent most of my life listening to people. I think it's time I turn it around and start talking. Listening is so important. You know, somebody's asking about Quincy. He never got back to us. Also,
I have been talking to Quincy. Well, I had him in the past already.
Phenomenal, because he hasn't responded to my brother and I, our email. We wanted to do an exclusive with him. What else? We do have a hedge fund manager coming on, I think, next month. So this is a crypto hedge fund manager. This is going to be exciting. A lot of other good players in this space are going to be coming on. And again, we're all just trying to really figure things out here and learn. But I think we have a good understanding of what we all need to do. And that most important thing I say is that diversification. You know, be diversified in and out of the system. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. Gold, silver, digital assets, real estate. Perhaps one day we can even have a specific one about real estate. It's also my area.
Sure, we'll be able to talk about all of this. I do have a session to teach in the next 5 minutes, so I have to go get off and start talking to somebody else. Okay, everyone. So thank you so much. And we're going to try to start doing this again Monday and Thursday. So
Thank you, guys. See you Thursday.
excellent. Ido, I'll talk